Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Katja Larsson. She's an incredible artist that lives in London. She's Swedish, but she lives in London, and she's torn between London and Stockholm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading.
Definitely torn right now.
Yeah, I know you are. So I know Katja. I've known Katja for quite a long time because we used to work together for a company.
Yeah.
And I knew Katja was an artist, but I didn't know how great of an artist she was until I started, researching a little bit more into her work and a little bit more into everything that she does. So Katja, thanks for trying to squeeze me into your schedule. I know you're a busy woman right now.
Wow. Never too busy for you, Tiago. And thank you so much for having me as well. I'm so excited.
No problem. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being an artist and the type of artist that you are. So I know that you graduated from the Glasgow School of Art in London, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then you have a lot of more accreditations. But let's talk a little bit about you. Tell me, so who's Katja? Who's Katja Larsson? How was that you came to be in this world?
That's the most difficult question ever. Well, I think how I come to be in this world is just as someone who likes to play with stuff. Like I've been doing that from day one. Like, if you ask my parents, like I was the kid probably who was down on the street, like collecting trash and building stuff from it. Like so I've always
That's
had like
amazing.
a curiosity when it comes to things, just the things that are around us and what they can become, really and truly. So I think that's me from day one. Is just playing with materials, playing with forms, and having fun with that. So really, where we are at now is an extension of that.
Of who you were before.
Yeah.
Did you have a preferred type of material that you were collecting, for example, when you were younger, before you professionalized yourself? Did you have a specific type of material that you liked, or?
I think that one of the things that sort of is still with me to this day is just any sort of little object that is a little bit ambiguous, like even sort of little everyday things like screw caps and little rubber sort of grommets and things like that, things that you don't really know where they come from, but they sort of belong to the world of things that we make. But then you can find them in the world and they can start to remind us of other things like fossils or shells or rocks or whatever. So I just, I think what I've sort of tried to maintain throughout my life, or just, I've had no choice. It's just been how it's been. But it's kind of like having an open mind to all those little things and thinking about them imaginatively, like what could this be if it wasn't what it was meant
a screw cap. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I have
a lot of fantasy sort of going on.
I have a phrase here that when I was researching to you, classical forms into everyday life. We're going to talk a little bit about it, because I know that you use a lot of classical forms, but that could be used in the everyday life. And I saw a lot of your art, and I've got some of your work that I want to talk to you about. But I wanted to talk to you about your studies as well. So you graduated at the Glasgow School of Art. What else have you graduated?
So I started when I was sort of in my late teens. I thought I was going to become a musician. I think that was my idea.
Oh, really?
But it sort of didn't really, coming towards the end of those studies, when everyone was deciding, like what next? Do I go to music university? Like what's the next step for me? It just didn't really feel like that was my sort of natural way of being. So I just did a bit of soul searching and sort of came to the conclusion that art, drawing, things like that was kind of what just came easy for me, and what I was really just, what I could do in my sleep and really enjoy. So I went to study an art foundation in the south of Sweden at a place called Konstskolan Munka, which is a fantastic school.
Yeah, I was trying to pronounce it. I went to look at it as well. It's a very famous art school, right?
It is. In Sweden, it's one of those kind of like, it's a school that a lot of really sort of now quite established artists went to as their first art school ever. And in a way, it was the best art school because it just introduced me to what it's like to just kind of like come up with your own ideas and take them seriously, and then see them through. And one of those years I spent there, it was 2 years school. One of the last year I spent kind of in the woods in a cabin, just making things without internet, without anything. So that really kind of got me connected to what it means to be an artist, actually.
To be an artist, yeah.
Yeah. And then I've had sort of years off between studying. I haven't studied consecutively from then, so I've had little years out here and there, which I think is quite healthy. But ultimately, I went to Glasgow to study.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, that's a big school and fantastic place, Glasgow, and the school is also really great in many ways. And that sort of led on to the Slade for a master's.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And did you know you were going to be doing casting? What's your favorite type of art?
Well, my favorite type of art is just kind of like it. Well, it's not like the things that I make myself necessarily, but I do love art that is based around objects. So any sort of sculpture that derives from a real world object but just becomes something otherworldly, it just speaks to me. I don't know why, actually. It's kind of like alternative reality, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, there's something about like one of my favorite artists is called Katharina Fitch. She made this big in London. She made this big blue rooster that was on the fourth floor.
Oh yeah, I remember in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, and for me, that's just like, you know, you look at that and you're like, okay, it's a big rooster, but it's blue. Like, what is it? What's it about? Like, it just tickles me.
I spent a long time there. I used to go, you know, I walk around in central London quite a lot, and I spent a lot of time looking at a rooster. So trying to imagine, you know, I know it's a blue rooster, but what is it trying to tell me? And it tells, you know, something different to everyone. Probably tells me something, and it tells you something different, right? But I was trying to figure it out. What was the art about?
I know it's very hard to actually work out what her art specifically is about, and I think that's what she wants. Actually, I think that's what she's going for. I think she wants to make these quite sort of like dubious, slightly infuriating things that which I recognize this, but I know it's not what it is. So what is it? Then? You know, is it something completely different?
Is that kind of art that you want to give her a call and say, what is it that you're trying to tell me? Because I can't figure it out what it is. Or is it this? You know, are you the type of person that goes around London and looking at stuff and saying, oh yeah, I can work with that, I can do that? Or, you know, because how is your creative process? For example, let's say you decide to create something. So how is it that do you sit down? Do you plan it on a piece of paper? Do you draw it? How is it?
So it can kind of, I think that ideas can sort of come to you at any point in time. But normally what it will be is, for me, I'll get a sort of impulse from something, and it can be from seeing an object that speaks to me in the same way that rooster might. You know, you see something like an excavator bucket or a tire or an exhaust pipe or a specific looking tree, and you look at them and you go, okay, I think that you're posing as a tree. I think that you're posing as one of these things, but I think you're something else, you know? I tend to find things all over the place in unexpected places where I sort of get a feeling that this object could have an alternative life, you know, and if I use it for a sculpture, like what can I do? Like what can I create from this thing, you know?
Yeah, I saw, so one of your art, I was looking at the solid silver is the tire, right? Yeah, so I was looking at that, so I saw that there were many colors of tires and many forms of tires, right? Is that the one, or is that the white one?
So the solid silver is, I'm glad you bring that up, because that's a very early work, and it was I made that in Glasgow. It was made as the second big sculpture that I made, which was made entirely out of paper.
Yeah, it was with the piano as well, right?
Yeah,
you did one with the piano that was made out of paper too.
Made out of paper. It was a grand piano.
That I didn't realize it was made out of paper. So when I saw it, I was thinking the logistics. I was like, how did Katja took a piano, to Glasgow, and then I read the fine line, explaining what it was, and it was paper. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that early work, the solid silver and the quiet and loud. Quiet Loud was the piano, solid
Quiet
silver is the Thai.
Yeah. Quiet and Loud. Quiet and Loud, the title comes from, well, it's a translation of piano forte, sort of. And also it's a mirror of Steinway and Sons, like how they write their logo. So it's a copy of a Steinway piano in paper. And I was studying photography in Glasgow. So that's how, and this was my segue into three-dimensional work, because the paper ultimately is flat. I had to measure and make blueprints for all the parts of these pieces, the piano and the tire, and then render them three-dimensional. So for me, that was my transition from working with flat things into 3D things. And ultimately, I guess it was about sort of weight and lightness. Like with the tire specifically, you have a very heavy object made out of something very light. So there's kind of like a bit of a dissonance in the viewer then, where you're looking at something that you recognize as a heavy object, but when you look at it closely, you're like, it's really fragile, it's really lightweight. So it was kind of about a very, in a way, quite a fundamental sort of aspect of sculpture, which is to play with that, like what is heavy and what is light.
For me, it was incredible when I saw the Quiet Loud. It was the first one that I saw it. When I saw the piano, and I saw in the white, it's a white piano, of course, in a room. For me, it almost hit me like the piano falling on me, because I felt it was something so heavy that for me, the piano, we have that image, when you see a cartoon, for example, piano falling to people, is something super big. And it also made me think when I was looking into it. That subject that we don't want to talk in a room, like if there's something that we need to talk between us, and we say is the white elephant in the room. In Portuguese, we have a saying that is the white piano in the room.
Really?
Yeah, that people don't want to talk about it. So when I
oh my God,
when I saw the white piano in that room, the quiet room, and I was like, shit, she's trying to make us think about all the stuff that we never said in our lives, and about the problems that we need to talk about it. So that's I think the thing that with the art, it's different to everyone. For me, I understood completely different than probably you wanted to say. It was quiet and loud. It's something loud. It was something loud for me, not quiet at all.
Wow, I did not know that. I mean, that to me is what I think is the big reward for an artist, is that eventually you make these things and you think it means a certain thing to you, but then realize when you put it out into the world, you sort of set it free and it takes on new meaning. With every person who sees it takes on a different meaning. So that's really fascinating to me.
It's incredible. And talk to me about the one the columns that I was talking, the Achilles, the Hercules, Arena, Apollo, Aeolus, Hercules too. So that one was amazing as well, because I got confused when I saw that one, because I was like, oh, I've seen she did the art before, with the tire, but then I realized it was a completely different thing, because it had the different colors. Then you had the name of the gods, right? All different gods. So how did you come up with that?
So this was another discovery that I made, and a lot of my sort of like epiphanies come from internet research, or like looking at eBay and stuff like that. So I was working on creating works for an exhibition that took place last year in Stockholm with my gallery in Stockholm, Cecilia Hillström. And I'd been working for some time to collect objects that sort of belong to the world of like the petrol industry, like cars, like contemporary stuff, but that have like a link to Greek mythology. And it wasn't the ties at first that I sort of discovered, but it was other things like branding, how for example Honda borrows like their branding logos from Greek mythology. So I thought that was very interesting. And then I discovered that a lot of tire manufacturers essentially brand their tires after Greek gods and heroes.
Yeah,
and you
I never realized it until I saw your.
You can read the names on the side of the tire. So like, as it would say, like Goodyear, Dunlop and stuff, it would actually say on some tires Hercules, Athena, Achilles, Apollo. And just kind of like going back to this thing of just playing with reality, I was like, well, what if these gods have actually taken the forms of these tires? Like how can we play with this? And And with the tire specifically as an object, it also visually links back to these sections of column that you will see when you go to an ancient ruin in let's say Greece. So I just basically cast the tires in this stone material and stacked them on top of each other as though they were columns in different ways.
Yeah, no, it was incredible, because when I was looking into it, I never realized, and I went to research, about the Greek names on the tires, and I was like, oh my God, how did I live 40 years of my life not knowing that? I knew, that they had no Dunlop tires, but I didn't realize that they could have names on the tires. And why do you think they put the god names on the tires? Is that for protection? Is that for that sense of?
I think it's really interesting. I've tried to figure out why. I've not been able to get to one answer with this, but I think there are some reasons. I think one reason is that a lot of these names sound very powerful, and therefore a lot of companies will use names that we associate with power and strength, like Hercules is pretty straightforward,
or Zeus,
Athena, Zeus, like stuff like this. But then you get quite dubious ones like Achilles. Like, why does Achilles?
Yeah, because it's not a good thing, because Achilles had not a good point.
Exactly, you've got the Achilles heel, that you've got this fallibility that I just think that perhaps they're not aware of the myths completely. So you use a name that sounds that gives you a feeling of strength, but actually you look into it, it's not really true. I mean, the other theory is that it's if we choose to believe in these gods, is that they could have inserted themselves into our objects as a way of surviving, as a way of sticking around. And it can be both. It can be any of these things. It can be none of these things. But it's fun to play with this, I think, because ultimately these are really throwaway things. And what if we imagine that actually, we're rolling around on the roads, like, with this god or goddess.
Yeah, it's true. I thought it was incredible that some of the names, for example, Athena. For me, Athena, it's a very powerful name, and there's a very famous. Well, she's not Brazilian, but she was married to a Brazilian guy called Athena Onassis. She was the daughter of the billionaire Greek ship construction king.
Right.
So her name is Athena Onassis. So how powerful, someone to call your daughter, for example, Athena. And then I saw the name on a tire, and I was like, I know it's the goddess, and I know, it's Athena is this very powerful person in Brazil, but also it's on a tire. And I was like, it made me feel a little bit, not uncomfortable, but I was like, they shouldn't put Athena's name on a tire. But just because I related to the Athena that I kind of know, there's one actual person called Athena that I know. So, I was like, that's incredible that we can play with that, the name of the tires, the name of the gods. And those tires were made of what, Katja? The ones
tires
that
I
you
made.
created.
So they're made of, I work mainly with a material called jesmonite, which is, it's a very cool material, because you can do a lot of stuff with it. And with this type of jesmonite, you can mix in, or they come with premixes a lot of the time that have like these rock elements to it. So you can sort of make rock, essentially you can cast rock from it. So a lot of these tires are made with marble, crushed marble, terracotta, that natural stone, charcoal, like things like this. So all of those materials I tend to add in, because for one, it creates a color that goes all the way through the object. So it's kind of a solid object. And also materials, just as objects, mean things. So marble has this kind of like association. Stone, regular stone, natural stone, even Portland stone has an association, because that's kind of what we build everything from. So there is a lot to decode in sculpture, which is very interesting. So that's kind of how I read sculpture and how I make sculpture, is like, what is the object that you're referring to, and what is the material that it's made?
What is it made of? Is that how you choose your art as well? Do you, when you go and do a sculpture, for example, let's talk about the tires. So do you think about the materials first, or do you think about the actual art first, and then you go like, I'm going to think about
I think it's a really good question. I tend to have an idea of the material before I start making something.
That's incredible.
So the material is usually part of the final idea. Like, if I discover, let's say for instance, I also found that there's these helmets, these motorbike helmets that are branded after Zeus and Icarus.
Yeah, I saw that one. What were they called again? They were
So there's one called Zeus ZS 508.
Oh yeah, that's the one I have here. Zeus ladies, right?
Yeah, it's a lady's helmet. But so with that, for example, it made no sense for me to make that out of a stone material because it's a helmet. So I wanted to link that back to artifacts that you might see in a museum, for instance. So for me, that always had to be bronze. So I sort of knew that I wanted to make the helmet out of bronze before I even started making it. But sometimes you have to change your mind halfway. Like you also have to look at what you're doing and just see if it works or not. And then at times you have to change.
Do you have a lot of times that you start doing something and then it doesn't work? For example, the material doesn't work, or it breaks, or you have to do it again. How is it the frustration? How is it to deal with that as well?
Well, I've started to not think of it as a frustrating thing. I think of it as part of it now, because like you're right, almost every single time you do something once and you have to do it again. But that first time is kind of like a test run. It's like a rehearsal. And that's when you learn how the material behaves, what works and what doesn't work, and then you have to do it again. So I almost sort of build that into my process. That like I'm doing your creative process, and now I have to do it for the second time, and then it works. But sometimes, I should say that it's become less and less so. Nowadays, it's not everything that I have to redo, but I usually have to try it once before I can really go for
before it can really take off. Let's talk about as well one that I have here about hunt and gather, the one with James. Because I remember when all that was happening, but I didn't really know what was happening. Yeah, so I was around when that was happening. So talk to me a little bit about that hunt and gather. Why did you choose James, and why did you choose the photos? Because they're photos, right?
Yeah. So hunt and gather it's kind of like quite an unusual work for me, because it's not a physical sculpture. It's a photograph of a man holding a sculpture. But but basically, this is the same as with anything else that I make. Like I don't basically make anything up. I only work from things that already exist. So so that picture in its entirety is actually a copy of an advert on eBay for a mammoth jaw. So it's a guy in Russia who wears these like mammoth t-shirts, and you have to sort of send a link to this picture that people can see what I'm talking about. It's a man selling mammoth jaws. That I don't know how he comes across these mammoth jaws, by the way, but it's a guy in Russia wearing a mammoth t-shirt, like an airbrushed mammoth t-shirt, and he sits on a sofa with this kind of like Scotch checked like plaid blanket, and he holds up these mammoth jaws. And there's one image where he's holding a mammoth jaw against his own body. And it just looked to me quite fascinating, almost like a man holding. It's got a little bit of like a uterus shape to it, like ovary.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. It's
like a man holding like ovaries against his own body. So it's got a double message. But it's also like the reason why I got interested in the image was because, for one, I wanted to buy the mammoth jaw to cast it and make a sculpture, but it wasn't possible because it was too expensive. So I made one out of clay, and then I was like, well, actually, I think this is more about this image of this man holding this artifact rather than anything else. So I made the sculpture. I made it out of gold silicon to make it sort of, again, a bit like that blue rooster, a bit otherworldly. And then I asked our mutual friend and colleague at the time, James, to model for it, because I mean, I think that James has something very special about himself in his expression. There was something I could sort of see that, like, he would have a way of conveying like this kind of like quite strange situation, but also like seriousness, and make people really question what this is. And he won't mind me saying, but it's sort of like, there was also something a little bit sort of colonial about it, like you know, like this idea of like man versus nature. You know, this kind of like trophy hunter, conqueror sort of.
For me, I think, because I know James as well, I think he's a very masculine man. He's a very, a real masculine man. And when I saw him, and because, he has a connection to Russia as well, when you were talking about it now. So I thought about like, now that you're talking about it, Russia, he's a very masculine man, but a very kind man. So, you see him, you think he's you know, but he's super kind and super nice, holding a very feminine object.
So and I mean, I think I have to give a lot of credit to James, because I think that a lot of the time, like when you're working on an art piece, like you're not really sure what it's about when you're making it. You just have this kind of impulse. You just have a feeling of what you want to do, and you can see it in your mind's eye, but you can't really necessarily explain it to someone. So a lot of credit to him for just being like willing to
just participate,
you know, and just be happy to do it. And he just, you know, he's great. He's such a great guy.
He's amazing. I love him as well. I thought it was amazing that you used him as well. Let's talk about go ahead.
No, I just it was shown very big as well. I don't think he was aware of how big it was going to be, but it was made into a wallpaper at the Market Art Fair in Stockholm with Cecilia Hillström again, and it made a big impression on people.
Yeah, it made an impression on me when I started. I remember, you know, you doing it and creating, but I didn't know it was that big as well. So let's talk about Cecilia, your curator. How did it happen?
So me and Cecilia actually started talking. She got in touch with me as I was starting out at the Slade. I just moved to London, and I was participating as well in this Saatchi exhibition in London when I just come here. And she was in London at that time, so she came to that show. So we were sort of in touch. She reached out to me as I was beginning my masters. So it's been really great, because she's one of those great gallerists who has this kind of like ability to see the potential in someone at an early stage. So she followed me throughout my master's studies, and I mean there was a lot of kind of like weird work that happened then as well. So she had the patience to see all of that.
To stick around,
just stick around and just remain curious. And it was great to have someone. Whenever I was going back to Stockholm, she's based in Stockholm. Whenever I was going back there, we'd have meetings, and she was quite, you know, interested to hear how the work was developing, because the work changed a lot. During.
So how do you see yourself, for example, from where you started to where you are now? How your art has changed, do you think?
So I would say that one of the things that I really wanted to get out of Slade, for instance, was to diversify and actually get familiar with more processes and materials, because these paper sculptures were great to make, but they were sort of one thing, and I really recognized that I needed to learn new processes like casting, for example, and also just become more versatile. So I think that what I would say, what's changed is maybe the sort of core interests have remained the same, but I'd like to think that the work has become more varied. There's a lot more materials at play. It's quite open. I like to try and sort of keep it open.
I agree.
But also just practical things, like, you know, when you're working with sculpture specifically, and you're working across different countries, you know, like how do you transport things? How do you store things? How do you build things? How do you make big things that you can then, you know, pack together,
take everywhere,
still, like, so it's a lot of practical stuff too, which at the end of the day is maybe not like the most fun stuff to think about, but still, if you can take it into account, you know, it can help you.
No, it needs to be taken into account as well. I wanted you to talk to me as well, your art, between Pro and Petroleum. Yes, because I saw it. It was in a big exposition, right? In a big.
Recently,
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about it and explain to me, because I understand one thing, but I want to know what you created, and then we can maybe cross paths.
So what they were, the first ones. It's a series of 9 images that are all taken from photographs that are taken of sculptures that I've made, and I've then displayed them in these slanted walnut frames. So it's images in frames, but they're made to look as though they're objects in.
But they're a little bit tilted as well, the frame,
tilted,
right?
Yeah, they're tilted so that you sort of look down. It's a bit of an illusion, like you sort of look down at the object of the frame, but it's actually an image of a sculpture suspended. So what I wanted to make, what I wanted to create was basically like a future archaeology of things that might become fossils at a certain point, and some of them are fossils already. So it's kind of like objects at various stages of transformation.
Yeah,
But
no, I loved it.
the impulse for them came from actually, and this happens to me quite a lot, that I'll read something like a book or a poem, and it will give me like an idea for a sculpture. So it came from reading this book called Machine by Peter Adolphson, where he describes this journey of an ancient horse, like an Eohippus, basically running through the forest, falling into a lake, dying, compressing, becoming fossilized, turning into oil eventually, and then getting sucked into like an oil tank, and then eventually becoming petrol, and then ultimately.
So it's his journey. It was his journey becoming the fossil.
So it's kind of, it's called Between Pearl and Petroleum because it's looking at objects in various stages of transformation, like between between a creature alive in the world and into petrol that we think of as maybe quite a dead, dangerous, toxic material. But ultimately, like we're all part of this world, and ultimately
we're all going to become that too.
It's sort of, it's this metamorphosis. So that's the idea.
I loved it. Yeah. What about the one called rheology?
Rheology. It's that was also quite like, it was one of actually the first things that I ever cast.
Yeah.
It's very big. It's basically, it's a boulder cast in pink silicon.
Yeah, I love the color, and I love the way. How big was it?
It's about 2 meters by 1 meter by 1 meter.
Yeah, so it's pretty big.
So it's bigger than a human. Rheology means something. It means the sort of it talks about the science of solids and liquids. So rheology is like how you measure the rheology of something is essentially kind of how viscous it is, so how sort of melty it is. And even certain hard materials can have a rheology. So you have things that appear to be rocks, but actually they're slowly melting, but just over thousands, millions of years.
I thought, when I looked at it, I thought it was the cliff. It was a huge cliff. I thought it was a piece of land. There was a cliff. Yeah. The cliff that we have in Dover, that big one, the white one.
I've done cliffs. I've done cliffs after that as well. But rheology was the first thing that ultimately it's quite a simple contrast piece. It's like, you take something from nature and you cast it in this very synthetic material. Yeah. So it's like a soft, squidgy rock. And the pink silicon is talking about like industrial design and toys and phone cases and stuff.
And it's just amazing because you don't see, you see pink in nature, obviously, but you don't see pink in that form, because you see a flower that's pink and it's pretty, but you don't see, a form that you can't really tell what it is, if it's a cliff or not, but it's pink, right? Because you don't see anything pink that big.
It's very funny, like when I've gone to see it, because it's outdoors, it's in Devon and Broomhill Sculpture Park, and when I've gone to visit it, it's quite funny to observe how insects react to it, because you get a lot of dragonflies attracted to it. So it's actually it's quite snails and things like this. I think they think it's a flower, that it's something
because they probably recognize the color, right? Because they know the color, but they don't probably know the shape. Talk to me a little bit about cat and compact. Cat compact? Compact. I don't know how to pronounce. What's the number after? Is that 1 and 3? Is that
1,
first
2,
and
3?
third?
Like so, yeah.
Oh, 1, 2, 3.
There's 3 of them. Again, I made those when I was at the Slade last year, and again that came from that body of work, or that series of sculptures came from something that I read as well, which is something which is probably an urban myth, but there might be a truth to it. I'd like to think there's a truth to it. Basically, I don't know if you've heard of this, but in Kensington and Chelsea, obviously a lot of people want to like expand their properties, but you can't build on the height, you can't build on the sides, so people dig basements to get extensions to their houses. And I read someone wrote an article to say that actually it's become cheaper to dig out the extensions and to bury the digger under the house rather than to get it out. So in my mind, I was like, okay, so there's supposedly between 500 to 1,000 buried excavators in Kensington and Chelsea.
We
So
should
I
go and
made
research into it and really go for it and
I want to
find
go
it.
and knock on houses and just ask people. Because
So do you mind if I just take a look at your basement extension?
Exactly. So I made these digger buckets, and they're just the front, they're just the head of the digger that just digs out the material. For one, I have to be honest, I made them because I thought they were really beautiful. I mean, I picked those
they are
specific
beautiful,
diggers because there's something quite stunning about their form. Not all diggers look like that, but these specific ones really do. So they're made to be like sort of relics over these supposedly buried diggers. And like, again, sort of future archaeology. So they're made out of various stone materials, marble, Portland stone, and charcoal to again speak of this idea of like a future fossil, or the marble one specifically like as an elevated object, like a bit of a Greek statue.
And how is it to work with marble, and is it very hard to get? How is it? Because I have no idea. How do you buy marble?
I've never bought a block of marble. I've only ever worked with marble in this dust form, because that way you can cast it. So it doesn't really end up looking like a finished block of marble wood with veins and stuff, but you get this kind of sheen, like you get this brilliance from it. You can polish it and you get the sort of glittery surface.
And is it heavy, the same as normal marble? Is it super heavy? Or?
Jesmonite isn't really, and that's the other thing about that material, which is good, is that you can make casts quite thin, so that you can carry them yourself, you can move them yourself quite easily, and they're quite strong. So for me, it's like, I don't know if it's good for the environment specifically, but I know it uses less materials than, let's say, a big block of stone that you have to transport and chip away at. So
because when I think about marble, I think of something super heavy and something super hard to move around. But if you're working in something that is completely different, because you're working with marble, but it's not that heavy, so it gives the image that it's super heavy, but actually it's not.
I think of these like more like ingredients. Like you have marble as an ingredient, but it's not made out of solely marble.
What about charcoal? How is it to work with? Is it messy?
Well, it's very dry. The charcoal mixes, like the coal mixes, make everything very, very dusty and dry. And that digger, the excavator piece, Cat Compact 3, I think it is. That's the black one. It's actually lighter than the other ones, because there's something about the charcoal, about the carbon that's in there, that sort of creates the bubbles, I think, and it just makes it.
That was the black one was my favorite, actually, because I knew it was charcoal. Because I have this thing with charcoal and coal. Every time I see it, I've got to touch it because I love the texture. Sometimes when I was a child, I wanted to try it, like to really put it in my mouth and try it. There's something about it. I'm those crazy people that want to try the material. I have this thing with charcoal that at school, the teacher with the blackboard, I always wanted to go there and help the teacher because I wanted to be touching the charcoal. I don't know what it is.
It's chalky. It's kind of like, it's crunchy. Like it's.
I don't know what it is. I have this thing with material as well, and this is something fun that I don't think I ever told a lot of people. So when I was a baby, when I was a child, I had a dummy, but I didn't use the dummy. It didn't suck on the dummy. So my granny had a wall in her house. I used to go with the dummy at the wall, scratch the wall with the dummy, and smell it. Wow. So it had a hole, a specific part of the wall that I could, get whatever the material was. I don't know if it was cement or if it was whatever, the brick. So for years I had the dummy, and I used to go there. I would scratch the dummy on a little piece and smell the because I wanted to, taste it and smell it and touch it. That specific part of the wall. How crazy is that?
I think that makes a lot of sense to me, Tiago. Not you, but I would do that too. I would do that too, for sure. And there probably was something in that wall that was maybe some walls are made out of chalk and things like that as well. And
I remember it until today. I think it was my granny's house was built with this bricks that were like terracotta, and I used to go. I remember my granny saying, "Do you want to go to another spot?" because this one there's a hole now. I was like, no, I want to keep on this one because I like this specific spot. She was
You've been working on that. You've been working on that.
Yeah, I've been working for years on that spot. And then my mom got rid of the dummy, and then I had a piece of cloth because I couldn't go with the dummy anymore. Then I had a piece of cloth that I used to go there and work on that piece of art of mine. But
you were a sculptor back then. Like that's fundamentally what it is,
Yeah,
but it's true. And I mean,
it's funny because you never think, because I told you I'm not a creative or anything. So I find very interesting when someone is creative like you, to come up with the process that you do. I know that you're in your studio now. Do you want to show me a little bit? Is that something that you're working on?
Absolutely. I've got one sculpture here today. I don't know how I can really flip. This
Turn
is my
around.
series. Yeah.
Oh, this one, yeah.
Yeah, this one is new. You're the first one to see it, actually.
What is it made of?
So this is a cast from driftwood that is positioned on this. Let me see. Yeah, it's positioned on a concrete base, and I'm working on this series of sculptures right now.
That's incredible. Yeah, I love it.
That are sort of visually linked. So you've got like one other sculpture here is an exhaust pipe, for example.
Oh yeah.
So it's exhaust pipes and branches that seem to have like a kind of visual likeness,
Yeah, they kind of look the same, but for me they're a little bit opposite, in word, because it's a dead tree. Probably the tree is dead because of the fumes that come out of that.
I know, right? I know. It's a sort of like it's quite in a way it's like quite a simple juxtaposition, like like something from the world of industry, something from the world of nature, but ultimately these things are quite visually similar. Like you sort of look at this industrial design and you actually see that, well, clearly someone borrowed from the world of biology here when they designed
of course
it.
And they're linked, ultimately they're linked as well, because there is a link. If people can find a link, I found one and probably found another one, and that's amazing.
And I try not to judge these objects too harshly. I try to sort of just let them be what they are and just bring out these visual elements, and then people can kind of make what they will of that. But I'm always looking for beauty, like I can judge an exhaust pipe all I want because of what it's doing to the world, but it's also so beautiful,
It is, because it takes a lot of time, whoever created that as well, it takes a lot of time and effort for someone to come up with something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got these kind of manifold exhausts that are so
because it's the opposite for us. Got it.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
There's ultimately, it's like form follows function with these.
And color.
But there's something so similar,
Yeah, and I love that it works. Yeah, I love the. Yeah, it looks super real, like 100%. I just want to touch it. I'm that person that cannot go to an art gallery, and I'll be wanting to touch everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, like, I do make things nowadays that can be touched. I know you were not supposed to touch things in galleries, but I know so well that feeling that you're describing as well, of having that dummy and going to the wall and rubbing it because you're curious about materials. Perhaps. Like we are curious about materials, and especially when you're working with things that look as though it should be a branch or a tree, but it's clearly not. Like it's dusty.
But then it's not. Yeah.
You want to touch it. You want to feel what that sensation is like. So I know that people touch.
You know the feeling. Yeah. With your art as well, when you get, do you get a lot of feedback directly to you? For example, do people come to you and say, Katja, I really love that piece, or I thought that piece was this? Do people get in touch with you directly?
They do. I mean, I think via Instagram, especially nowadays, there's you have this kind of like direct. If an artist chooses to be on Instagram, you can speak to an artist that you like directly, and that's great.
Yeah.
So I do get feedback from things that I might, put online, or when there's a real exhibition as well. Obviously, that's kind of where you have the most and maybe the best response, because people are experiencing things in real life.
Yeah, and they
So,
decide.
yeah,
I love that you can
happy
talk directly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing, Katja, how was your work during the COVID? Did you keep working, and how was it?
So COVID's been quite interesting. I think that what was so right before we had the lockdown here, I mean, where I sort of lucked out was that me and this other great gallery in New York, Icon Contemporary, we did the New York Art Fair, the Armory Show in New York in the start of March, and that was before everything locked down. So that actually went ahead, which was great, and it was really fun.
Good. Yeah.
But right after that, everything started shutting down. So fortunately, I can't think of anything that I've had planned this year that has had to cancel, which is great. Like, so
That's amazing.
the museum show that showed the Between Pearl and Petroleum series in Malmö, Shapeshifters, that went ahead. I'm working on a public sculpture in Sweden that's also going ahead, but I haven't been able to go to deal with any of this. Like, I haven't been able to actually go and see any of this myself. Yeah. But luckily, we find clever ways of working things out during COVID. Still, you have to find different ways of communicating to others how things need to be made. So it's been fine. It's been fine. I mean, if anything, just like same as anybody else, just like longing for a bit of a social life in the way that it used to be. I'd like to go to the theater. I'd like to go to cinema. Like, it's all that stuff that really informs what you're doing. And as an artist, for me, almost my life has remained the same, minus the fact that I can't go to Sweden to go home and see family and do work there. But here in the studio, it's been largely the same. It's very socially distanced anyway. But I do miss that world around. You need that for your inspiration as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have to say, I've been lucky. I've not had to really cancel anything. I've been able to keep working. I've not gotten sick. I don't know anyone close to me that has. So we have to count our blessings.
Our blessings. Tell me about it. Really. So do you have anything that hasn't happened, like art-wise or work-wise, that is about to happen, or something that is coming up that people can maybe look forward to?
Yeah, well, hopefully. So one thing that I'm really excited about, we'll have to see now, because obviously, like yesterday or the day before, they introduced these new restrictions. For maximum six people again. But there's been a great initiative in London started by two companies, one called Outside the Zone and the other is Chaos Europe, and they're doing something called the Sunday Art Club in Shoreditch, where they've basically, in a COVID safe way, they've tried to bring lots of different art forms together, like theatre, music, and visual art. So they've done that twice, 2 Sundays now, and for the next one, which we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with that in September, but hopefully in September I'll be curating a selection of art from my own sculptures together with 2 other great painters, Tristan Baller and Agnieszka Katzballer. So
that's amazing.
Hopefully, like that will be a show that will be curated. It will be here in London in Shoreditch relatively soon. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I will. It'd be great if you could come.
Yeah, I will. 100%.
And next week, I'm installing some public sculptures in Sweden via FaceTime.
Wow. Oh, really? Well, that's very safe.
It is, and I'm 100% relying on everyone over there, like that's involved in that project to do it, but they've done everything. That's why they've been great. So it's going to be really fun.
It's amazing that you can do that kind of because it's something very peculiar and it's something very specific that usually you have to be there because you're the artist. You know how the art should be, right? So it must be difficult for you as well and challenging in a way to have to guide people over FaceTime to do it, because
it's very hard, because I think what's hard about doing it on distance is that some things, if we just manage to go ourselves and look at something in real life, we can point to something like, oh, okay, that needs to change, we need to do it like this. But via email and stuff like that, the communication, everything takes longer and it's more complicated, and also having to kind of like, it's a very strange thing that some artists get to experience this you know, and we're lucky if we get to, because normally it means that we're working with a bigger budget and on a bigger scale, but you're essentially making something that you're not making yourself. And so where do you kind of like, it's like your arms have to become longer. Like you have to have really, really sort of arm extension. Like, 'cause I've made these 3 massive sculptures that I've not even touched myself. I've not even touched them. But it's really funny because ultimately, you know, they look exactly like the designs and the models that I made, and it's about communication, and it's about how do I convey to somebody else how something needs to look.
Your idea, yeah.
You know, and empower them to do it, and also trust their artistic capabilities, because you know, everyone is capable of doing a great job if you let them do their best. So it's kind of more like being a project manager than being an artist.
A project manager with your own art, but you know, in different countries. Well, Katja, we're good. I think I know we've been here for 50 minutes already. Usually my lives are 45 minutes, so it means that we have good stuff to talk about. I wanted to thank you to take the time and talk to me. It was very enlightening. I spoke to you before. You know, I knew nothing about. I know a little bit about art, but I like to talk to artists because I have no creativity in me, and I think it's very inspiring. I do a little bit, but you know, it's very inspiring to really talk to a real artist and know your point of view and stuff, and how it is to create. And you do an amazing job in different things. So I wanted to show everyone the art that you do, so everybody can go into KatjaLarsson.com, right? It's your website.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all your information there. So I'm going to put it down here on the description of the video as well. And if people want to talk to you, where can they reach you? On your Instagram, right?
Yeah, they can reach me on the Instagram, or my email address is on my website as well. So yeah, you can reach out via Instagram, via email, any.
And you can see all your art over there as well. That's amazing. On your website, there's everything super explained. And if you Google Katja Larsson, you're going to see all her art everywhere anyway. But yeah, thank you very much, Katja.
And thank you so much for having me.
No problem.
It's been an honor to be on your channel. I love watching your videos as well.
Thank you, doll. And let me know, you're going to post everything about the Shoreditch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we can talk about it. I'll post it on my Instagram as well, so everybody can know about it. And I want to come and see your studio when we're free again. I want to come and see and touch everything.
It's very cool out here. Yeah, you know, it's right by the Thames, so you can also see some very cool sights.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of London. I love that look that they have there. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Katja. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.